What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode. We're in episode 7.
I cannot believe
of
it.
our Names series, whatever.
Yeah, series.
Here on the Fathom Beyond Sunday podcast, all about really just helping you grow in your faith between the Sundays, Monday through Saturday, just everyday life. And we've been digging in on this names topic.
Yeah.
For a while, all over the scripture. You're get excited about our last episode because we're going to be exclusively in the book of Revelation.
Right. And we've done a pretty good job staying out of Revelation up till now.
Yes, we have.
We've done, even as many times as we have wanted to go there, we've done a pretty good job staying out of Revelation.
But we're going to turn our attention to the New Testament, specifically to the Gospel of John, and to a theme. Like, he's all about names.
Yeah, he really
titles.
is.
And Jesus really kind of begins to own it. As we look through like the Gospel of Mark, there's something known as the Messianic Secret, where Jesus is often like very kind of reserved about who he is for a certain period of his ministry. John, we don't get that kind of stuff as much, that kind of conversation. He's kind of telling a story through these themes. And it just happens to be like in our language, I am. It's this very statement of being that builds on and Jesus saying who he is. And so we're going to go through these. Yeah.
So we'll spend a little time. I think in one of our like Trinitarian like series within this series, we talked and said little bits about this, but we just wanted to spend some time really like kind of walking through what he says, these 7 different statements, and just kind of hitting back to where they connect.
Yeah, and that's what I'm excited about, is because Jesus is connecting these back to things that have been revealed about God.
Right.
And now Messiah, the branch, is here. The Messiah is here, and he's Lord, and people are recognizing him as Lord. And he's leaning in and giving very clear kind of connection to his divinity. And that's how the Gospel of John starts. Yeah. In the beginning was the Word. Right? Yeah. That's a name. name for God, name for Jesus.
Yeah.
So
I really love that he doesn't have one or two names, like that there are all these different facets of his lordship that he is revealing in the different names, because we see it's actually all these really common nouns, like these really common things, common parts of life. Everyone knows what he means when he says, I'm the bread of life.
I never really, like, they're all so common.
It's common.
Like bread, light, door.
Yes.
Sheep,
shepherd, right.
Life.
Yes. Vine. Like,
these are like some of the most common things. And he's like, all these commonalities of your entire life, what they really mean. Right. They really mean. What they really found their meaning is in me.
Yes.
That's really, I love that. That's huge.
Yeah. So I just love that there is no one who would hear this and not know, like, well, what's bread? Right? When he says, I'm the bread of life. Well, what is bread?
Yeah.
Just about everybody would have a frame of reference for bread. I mean, really, anybody. And he knows, because he is the Word, he knows this is going to be written down. This is going to be in canon. Like, this is going to be in Scripture. This is going to go out. This is not going to be some really, like, difficult to understand picture for my people, even in the future, right? Yeah. Like, people are going to get it when I say bread.
Yeah.
The bread of life.
And we see bread as like, it's like carbs, right? They're sustaining energy, I think is like.
Yeah, there's sustenance there.
Yeah, there's sustenance. And so there's this idea of like sustaining life, and our physical life. And what Christ is saying here is, he sustains our spiritual life. Like, he's the bread of life. Yeah. All life is found in him. So, and then this idea of bread has been something that's been consistently, God has shown himself as provider.
Right.
And the manna, right? That's a bread-like type of wafer.
Yes.
There was the bread of the presence that was there in the tabernacle, in the temple. So,
yeah. So if we skip forward a couple of chapters into John chapter 8, so that was in John chapter 6. In John chapter 8, he calls himself the light of the world. He is the light of the world. So this is John chapter 8, verse 12. Again, Jesus spoke to them saying, I am the light of the world. Whoever follows me will not walk in darkness, but will have the light of life. He is light.
Yeah.
Again, everyone has frame of reference. Even the blind people have a frame of reference for what light is and what that, like even the literal blind people know that there is a sensation and a difference in light.
And how comforting is that, really, to know? And just because life gets really dark. Life gets really dark, and first century Christians were feeling this in their world of just different dark things going on. We can experience that and see that in our world. But Jesus saying, I'm your God. I'm the light. There's no darkness in him, because he's God.
Right.
He's God. And we'll see that light thing. It shows up throughout the Old Testament. We don't have time to go through all of them.
Right.
But it's going to show up again in Revelation too. And so we'll circle back to that one.
in such a beautiful way. Yeah. Gosh, like my favorite.
Right.
All right. So if we jump forward again to John chapter 10, then in John chapter 10, he is going to say a couple of different things. He's going to say that he is the door first. He is the door, and that some translations, your translation might call it a gate. Yeah. So sometimes it's the door, sometimes it's the gate. Super common thing, right? Like he is the door in verse 7, or the gate in verse 7. And then he is the good shepherd in verse 11, and I think again in verse 14. He is, I love in verse 14 in particular, actually, where he says, I am the good shepherd. I know my own, and my own know me. Just as the Father knows me, and I know the Father, and I lay down my life for the sheep.
And this is a really significant one. I think we should take a couple minutes and really unpack this one. One, because this is a name of God. Previously, everybody probably knows Psalm 23.
Yeah, Psalm 23 and David.
The Lord is my shepherd. And it's David, a shepherd, emoting and saying, no, God, you're my shepherd. And so he's already got that going. But shepherding was a super normal occupation, super normal part of life. And if you really trace how shepherds were looked at in life, it's kind of interesting, because there's highs and lows.
Yeah.
Like, people saw, like, oh, Abraham and, like, Isaac and Jacob, they were all, like, they were shepherds, and, like, that was a good thing. And then, like, by first century, it was kind of like, they're
meh.
Yeah, meh.
Or less than meh.
Yeah, for sure. So there were some different things on that. But shepherds were seen as, like, leaders. So even in, like, Ezekiel 34, like, God condemns, like, through the prophet Ezekiel, he condemns the shepherds, and he says, like, they've been selfish, they've cared for themselves, and right. God says, like, through the prophet, he says, I will come and I'll be their shepherd. And so it's like David recognizing it, centuries later, a century or so, like, later, prophet, like, God speaking and saying, no, like, there's all these shepherds who are failing on the job and not leading people. They're leading people astray. They're hurting. I'm going to come and I'm going to be their shepherd. And Jesus is like, the shepherd's on the scene.
Yeah.
I'm a good one.
And I love that word good, because I know I say this a lot. Gosh, you probably have, I feel like a broken record on this podcast saying, when God calls something good, we just have so many adjectives for what we call good, and how good has, like, taken this different connotation where it's like, oh, it's good, better, best, right? And so we need this. But when God calls something good, man, it is good.
Yeah, it's baller good, yeah.
It is. It is. And so he is the Elohim of Elohim. Like, he is the goodest. You have heard me say God is the goodest. He is. So when he's calling himself the good shepherd, like, that's not just like, I'm all right at this.
And it's intimate language. I mean, as you see here, it's like, it lays down his life for sheep. He's not he knows his sheep, and his sheep know him. And so Jesus isn't like, hey, I'm just like this leader. No, I'm like among you. I'm walking the earth.
Yeah.
I'm guiding you as the light, as a shepherd, but not like just a light, like, hey, you guys head over there, like he's like directing traffic.
Right.
Like, no, he's a shepherd. He's in it with us. And each one of these statements begin to round out this picture of who Christ is.
Right. So he's sustainer in
Yeah.
the bread, and he's light, and there's no darkness in him. And then he is the door. Like, he's the one that, he's like protector in that way, right? He's the one who lets in and lets out, and he's the protector. He's the good shepherd. If we move forward to chapter 11, then in chapter 11, we see that he calls himself the resurrection and the life. And he's now already said he's going to lay down his life for the sheep.
Mm-hmm.
And then he becomes in verse 25,
Yes.
he says, Jesus said to her, and talking to Martha, this is his best friend has just died.
Yeah.
The death
Yeah.
of Lazarus, his best friend has just died. And he's, talking to the grieving sisters of Martha and Mary. And he says to her, he says to Martha, I am the resurrection and the life. Whoever believes in me, though he die, yet shall he live.
I love this one. As we dive into them, I really love this one so much because it is in the raw reality. We were talking about all the Old Testament stuff in experience, and like they would have agreed. Martha and Mary, they're like, yeah, we know, like, you're the life, like you're the Lord, like we know that.
Yeah.
But they're getting ready to experience, and they're encountering him in his fullest, in his power,
Right.
and what he's capable of, that he can fully be trusted, and they can find hope in him.
Even in this very hopeless feeling time, right?
Yeah.
This very hopeless feeling time, because they had reached out for him and asked him to come sooner,
Yeah.
right? And so they did feel hopeless, like, oh no, like, we know what you could have done then.
And even, I think there's hopeless, but there's this whole conversation right before it.
Yes.
Where, like, your brother will rise again. She's like, yeah, I know
I
he's going to
know.
rise in the resurrection. So there's like this hope, but it's like a far off hope.
Right.
And and they're waiting for the hope to show up real close.
Yeah.
And Jesus is like, I'm that hope that's close. It's resurrection, and I'm life, and I'm here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And if you don't know that the full story of Lazarus, man, just like stop right now and read. Pause this.
Yeah.
Don't listen to anything else that we're saying.
John
Really
chapter
just
11.
read John chapter 11, and Jesus' grief and what he does, and how he meets people in their grief, and works a miracle, a really beautiful miracle that hadn't been seen like that.
And this was a
in that same
major,
way.
like, Jesus revealing who he is, I am the resurrection and life, what it really leads to, and I think this is significant to our whole podcast, I really do. What it leads to, she said to him, like, they're having this whole, like, do you believe this? Jesus asked, do you believe this? And she said, yes, Lord, I have believed that you are the Christ, you're the Son of God, even he who comes into the world. And so it's this faith that's building in her, that is at a certain level, and through experience, through watching God move, and Jesus is revealing himself at another level. And that's kind of what this whole thing has been about.
Yeah.
Right? God revealing. It's names of God as vehicles of revelation of who he is. So yeah, sorry.
I think that's great. We get more names. Again, we've said, like, we could have done an entire series of podcasts just on the book of John and the names in it, because he's called teacher, like a minute later, and
for sure.
all of that. So moving forward into John chapter 14, we are going to hear Jesus, we're going to read Jesus' words where he says, I am three things all in one, the way and the truth and the life. So in verse 6, Jesus said to Thomas, he says, I am the way and the truth and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me.
There's a lot of theological stuff going on here.
So much.
Especially in this part of it's really the whole book.
Right.
It's the Bible.
It's the Bible.
It's the Bible.
There's a lot of theological things happening in the Bible.
Shocker. Yeah.
Nailed it.
Yeah. Exactly. That's why you tune in to get these deep insights from us. But here, it's huge. There's no other way.
Right.
There's no other way. And I think his disciples are coming to understand that, even where, the moment when Jesus is like, hey, are you going to leave me? And they're like, where else would we go?
Right.
Like, you're the way.
Right.
We don't have anywhere else to go.
Right.
And again, that's being learned through experience here, even for Thomas, and that will continue, right? He'll wrestle with that.
Right.
Even
he
in
absolutely will.
Jesus is resurrected, and he's like, I gotta touch those wounds,
Right.
and there's a lot to it. But he's the source of not just of like the way of like following his way, like patterning our life after him, but in truth, like in like the very essence of what is true
Right.
and can be trusted. He's our source of truth, and so it's like, why do we trust the Bible? I mean, there's a lot of reasons. This is not going to be a whole podcast on that, but because it reveals to us who Christ is.
Right.
And he's the truth.
Yeah.
So.
And
anyway.
the life. And I love that. I do like the repetition of the way, the truth, and the life after the resurrection and the life, because he's tying life not just to life and death, but he's tying life to the living of your life.
Yeah.
Right? Your everyday life, and not just the difference between life and death. And so I think that's important. I think it's
both
intentional.
are essential. Yeah, absolutely. That's great. Yeah, I love that.
All right. So then the last one, we've made it to the last one in this particular book. So John chapter 15, he says, I am the true vine, and my Father is the vine dresser. I am the true vine. So that's connecting back to the way, the truth, and life. I'm the true vine, and my Father is the vine dresser. And that connects back to this idea of him being the branch, this like capital B branch that we kind of ended our last podcast episode, like last week we ended on that, is that he's not just a branch, but the source, and that the vine being the source.
I think Jesus contextualizes this a bit. Just the idea of a vine is like, it's like you said, it's common. It's in everybody's backyard,
right
around there.
Yes.
And here he contextualizes it, but he also propels it somewhere.
Yeah.
And that he says, I'm the vine, and verse 5, he says, and you are the branches. And so he does a similar thing with I am the light of the world.
Yes.
Within his own like teaching and ministry, not even building upon it. He Sermon on the Mount says, you are the light of the world. And in Gospel of John, we've looked at, he says, I am the light of the world. And here he's building on that. I'm the true vine. I'm the branch.
Yep.
I'm that root of Jesse, that we have been waiting for, the priest and the king coming together, the man in flesh.
Right.
The
king and priest and in harmony.
Absolutely.
The king and priest in harmony.
Oh, it's just incredible. But this call of the vine and we being the branches, it's a call for us to attach ourselves to him. To abide in him is the language that's used there, to remain in him. And outside of him, there's no fruitfulness. There is no sustaining life. There is no guidance.
Right.
There is no protection of a shepherd.
Right.
There is no life.
Yeah.
There is no truth. We must abide in him, in the vine. And we do that by faith. Very simply. Yeah. We do that by faith and by his grace.
Yeah.
So
yeah. That was a very quick run through of all of these statements, but
I feel like we gave it. we got there. Yeah.
There's certainly, lots and lots more to talk about. But we hope that's what you're doing.
Yeah.
We hope that that's what you're doing, is taking what we are starting with and running with it, and that it is carrying you from Sunday to Sunday, right? That it is working in your heart and getting your mind going, right?
Yeah.
Working on these things in the middle of the week.
I think I'm praying. I don't know if I think. I really hope and I really pray that these are helping give you just a sanctuary, truly, to be sought outside the sanctuary.
Yeah. So we're grateful that you're here this week. You can always email questions or comments to Christina@fathom.church. You can text the keyword Fathom to 97,000 and follow the prompts to get and stay connected. We love you guys. We're happy that you've stuck with us through this. We are excited, really excited about next week's podcast.
Let's do it.
And looking forward to rounding out this journey in the names of God. So we'll see you back here next week.